Next up, I want to remind you again about those QR codes as Alison George is giving her talk. Alison is the State Director of Housing, and I asked her briefly what her favorite thing about economics was, and it was that it's all based on a crystal ball. So without any further ado, please welcome up Alison.
Innovations. AI.
Good job.
Streamlining. Change. Disruptors. All of these things impact our housing markets. But one area that hasn't significantly changed through this time is actually construction. We've had innovations, but we haven't had that silver bullet that has really changed how we significantly do things quickly, more rapidly. We're still looking for that silver bullet. So today, I'll be talking about the equation of housing and how these different things impact the work you all do and I do at the state. My name is Alison George. I'm the director of the Colorado Division of Housing in the Department of Local Affairs. I've been at the state for 15 years now. I actually come from affordable housing development. I worked for the country's largest for-profit affordable housing developer and the country's largest nonprofit affordable housing developer, which really guides my perspective and how I look at these challenges that we face. So as we look at the, let me get started here. Yes. As we look at this equation, I want to do a little bit of level setting, okay? Talking about supply, talking about demand, talking about how that equals affordable housing or not, okay? How the state and how government actually might fit into this equation. And then we'll talk about the housing market when it's left on its own. And of course, then looking forward into what the future might look like. But before I do that, surprise, surprise, I'm actually retiring. Yes, pretty soon actually, in a couple weeks. So I wanted to introduce, Tyler is not able to be here today with us, but he will be taking my place. And I am incredibly excited because he is really going to move this needle forward in our work. Tyler Jekyll has tremendous experience, and he has tremendous experience in looking at how things work as we put them on the ground, how we can improve the implementation of the things that we're rolling out. So I'm a little embarrassed to even talk about this with this group, okay? Because I feel like it's kind of like everybody knows supply plus demand. But I think it's important to level set here because we have a lot of factors that we talked about earlier that impact our supply, how quickly we can build things. When you're applying for a permit to build something, how long does it take for the city to review the documentation in order to get that permit? How quickly are we doing things? How costly are those materials? Then the demand. How many people do we have moving to the state? How many people do we have moving to Colorado Springs? How many people do we have qualified to actually do the work? All of these things impact affordability. So I want to jump into the state demographer's work. So the state demographer actually is a part of the division, or the Department of Local Affairs, excuse me. And they recently came out with a report assessing what housing needs we have in the state. I want to highlight the good news. The largest gap that we've had was in 2019, when we needed 140,000 units throughout the state for housing units. I'm excited because that's actually been reduced by 25%. So now we have a NEVA of 106,000 units. It's still significant. In order to maintain that, we have to build 34,000 units a year. Sounds like a lot though, doesn't it? It is. The reason we were able to catch up is because we actually, for the last 3 years, up to 2023 actually, between 2019 and 2023 to be specific, and the state demographer would really want me to be specific, let me tell you. So with that, we've actually been building 43,000 units. That's why we've been able to keep up. So the state demographer is looking very closely on an annual basis as we get numbers to keep track of what we need to continue building, okay? This is the market that is doing this. This is not the government controlling how many units we build. So what can we do as a state to incentivize these things? Now, a part of this report, they reference the National Low-Income Housing Coalition's affordability gaps. This is something I want to, actually, I'll walk over and I'll point, because I don't know, it's going to take me a while to figure out how the pointer works on the little thing I have here. So this is actually done by income, okay? And so these bars, this is extremely low income, up to 50% of the area median income, and I'll give you the numbers actually in Colorado Springs here in a second. 80% of the median income and 100% of the median income, okay? And so this first bar chart shows per 100 households, how many units or how many homes are actually affordable at that income band. So what you can see is there are only 26 units per 100 households at extremely low income that can actually afford a unit. Okay, for Colorado Springs, let's talk Colorado Springs. There are 30,000 individuals, that's 10% of your households, that are extremely low income. That's people making below $27,000 a year. These people are paying more than 50% of their income toward their housing costs. So the second bar chart, what it shows is housing cost burden. The blue is 30%, somebody that's paying 30% of their income toward their housing costs. I want to focus on the orange though, because the orange is the households that are paying more than 50% of their housing costs. So now you're talking about people that make $27,000 a year that are paying more than 50% of their income toward their housing. That's a challenge. And you can see, as you go up in the income bands, the availability of housing affordable to those housing groups, the housing stock is there that they can afford. And so this is relevant because when we start to talk about the American dream, who has the greatest access to that American dream? Before I move to the next slide, I want to mention a person that I met. She had the American dream. When I worked at Mercy Housing, she was moving into a development that I had worked on as a developer. Sister Lillian, the CEO, and yes, when you work at Mercy Housing, the CEO is a sister. And let me tell you, she was a force to be reckoned with. That said, she said, Alison, you should help with this move-in. And I thought, why? I'm going to tell you about the most impactful experience in my career. Experience to me that influenced my work. So with that, I went to this move-in. It was supportive housing. The person that I moved in was Nancy. She lived in the Front Range. And when she lived there, she owned her home, she was married, and she started to have kids. And her child, her daughter, was born with a disability, and she found herself at Children's Hospital regularly. And in difficult times, sometimes difficult people can become more difficult. Her husband became abusive. She started drinking. She became homeless. She was actually homeless for 5 years. And when I helped her move into the development, she sat down on her bed and started crying. And all she could say was, "God is good." That is the most impactful time in my career. Can I say it's the most impactful in what I've done? Probably not. But it really got to me. Made me realize the work I wanted to do. Okay? So a component of housing is homelessness, because the number one driver in when the rental costs rise, homelessness rises too, because people cannot afford their home, whether it's rental or it's home ownership. So this first example is supportive housing with vouchers and services. The development that I moved Nancy into was supportive housing. It provided intensive services to help maintain that stability. In the work that we do at the state with supportive housing, we found that moving people into the supportive environment, we've achieved a 94% stability rate. The other exciting one is Sage Ridge. Sage Ridge is a new development that we worked on, and that is actually based on a development we did in Benton County, which is Fort Lyon. Fort Lyon is for people coming from homelessness with addiction issues. And so Sage Ridge is building on that. Actually, with Fort Lyon, we did it in 2013. Since then, we've served over 3,000 people addressing their issues in addiction. And Sage Ridge will expand on that. But building on that, we are adding specific detox services based on the work that we've done. So I want to take a step back, because that can be the ultimate impact that we really don't want. So what can we do regarding the factors that change affordability? So interest rates are up, land costs are high, wages, material costs, zoning, all of these things are the factors that impact how we can enter the market, how we can sell homes, how we can build housing. These are all the critical factors. Later this morning or this afternoon, you'll be hearing about water, another scarcity that impacts the work that we do. So, from funding to policies, with this, thinking about, I'm with the state. What is the role in the state, with the state in housing? I can tell you one thing. Government should not be taking the place of market. Market can operate on its own. Government and the place with the state, it's looking at where the people are not being served, where the market does not serve. And so focusing in on the work that we do, looking at funding, but funding's not going to solve all problems. We have to streamline things. We need to make things more efficient. Looking at the influences with policies. So at the Division of Housing, we do everything from emergency shelter assistance through down payment assistance. We provide funding for these things. We're the statewide housing administrator. We do housing vouchers. We serve over 11,000 households on an annual basis with housing vouchers. We also regulate mobile home parks and the factory-built housing. There have been incentives over the last several years about how can we bring back factories into our state, because we're looking for those silver bullets that are going to do more housing more quickly so that we can address these challenges that we have in our communities needing more housing. So these are a few examples. Bentley Commons, actually. This is one that we'll be celebrating the grand opening in just 5 days, actually. We provided over $9 million to help build 192 affordable apartments. Launchpad is actually supportive housing for youth experiencing chronically homeless, which is challenging when you think about youth and the fact that they have already faced those challenges to that degree. But 50 units, and we provided almost $5 million to make that development happen. Rocky Mountain Community Land Trust going into acquiring housing so that we can have that long-term affordable home ownership options, and then of course down payment assistance. These are all things that we're working in the Colorado Springs community, providing these funding options. Now, with COVID, there were significant funds, and the state decided to invest significant dollars into our communities around the state. And so the state, because we got funding, we ended up putting $85 million into development. When we looked at that, though, we actually got more money. And we knew, as state government, we were not the most efficient to get those dollars out the door. We do administer revolving loan funds, but we know we have partners with CDFIs that can do it more quickly. And so what we did was we split the money in half, and half the money went to our partner CDFIs for them to administer, and then half then went through the Division of Housing. And so these are some examples, one in Ouray, Frederick, and then of course Frisco, our future of housing around the state. Now, this is a big one. Proposition 123. In 2022, Coloradans voted to invest in affordable housing. So annually, up to $327 million can be invested in affordable housing. The Division of Housing is focused on homelessness and homeownership. Our partners over at OEDIT, Office of Economic Development and International Trade, are focused on loan programs in rental housing and land banking. So with our programs, it's incredibly exciting to be able to report out that we're able to serve over, if you hold on one moment, we received, well, let me say, with the first year of funding, we're doing over 1,100 affordable housing units and serving over 81,000 households around the state through the Division of Housing. These resources go a long way in serving our communities. But it's not just about money. The other thing that Prop 123 did was it was intended to provide incentives to our local communities to build more, to build faster. And so communities had to set goals in order to build more housing, improve their housing stock to make it more affordable across all of those bands that we discussed earlier, or I mentioned earlier. Okay? The other component of it is, after 3 years, local governments have to commit to a streamlined process for entitlements. That's critical. If folks have applied for entitlements to build housing recently, you know it can take years. Now we're talking the potential of 90 days. That's a significant impact. Another thing that we do is advocacy. And so I want to bring up this federal advocacy. I actually testified a couple months ago in DC, and it was for a federal home program. So this is a funding program. The impact nationwide is 1.4 million affordable housing units. In Colorado, it's 500 projects assisting over 29,000 households in 60 communities. That all said, sometimes there are great ideas and the implementation of them is clunky, okay? And since this program started in 1992, there have been several things, regulations that have passed, and they don't necessarily work together. And so what I was actually testifying about was about improving the program. Because we have to look at the things as they've been implemented and look at how we can improve things. And so aligning things so that we can move more quickly, and particularly after a disaster, when we need to be addressing the housing needs of people in our communities, we can't have regulations slowing us down. So with the Polis administration, he has been focused on land use, codes, and permitting, really looking at across the continuum of how housing happens and how we build housing, where are the pain points? What's slowing us down? And these are the three components that we see most in slowing things down. So the land use changes, we've had the focus on transit-oriented development. How can we get fewer cars on our roads? How can we build density around these transportation modes? So there have been funding and incentives provided to develop more transit-oriented developments. Parking minimums, reducing parking around these transit developments, housing developments that is, around these transit-oriented developments so that we can have fewer cars on the road and maximizing transportation. Additionally, housing needs assessments. We talked about Prop 123 and providing that housing. Well, with housing needs assessment, assessing what AMI levels, what income bands do you need that housing at more? Where can you focus as a community? And then accessory dwelling units. Streamlining how we do accessory dwelling units. So there were actually funds to help local governments develop the plans to put more ADUs more rapidly. And then in addition, financing to actually fund the developments. Another component is when you think about factories. So I mentioned that we regulate factories. Senate Bill 002 from last legislative session, it was focused on codes. Think about you own a factory, you're building housing. Alison asked to build a unit, but I want to build my unit in Colorado Springs. Well, what happens if Eric wants to build in Winter Park? that factory is trying to do as quickly as it can, build things. And changing code by code based on jurisdiction, it increases the rate of errors. It slows the process down. And so what this bill does is it creates regions where the codes will be the same for factory-built housing. And so there is a technical advisory committee now that's meeting to streamline and create these regional codes. So as we talk about streamlining for efficiency and transparency, you know, as a state government person, I don't control much, you know? The decision makers are elected officials. You know, they're the ones creating law. I'm administering programs. So what's within my control? What's within my control is being the best that we can be. Streamlining, making things more efficient, making things more transparent so folks know what's actually happening with the dollars. So one thing that we're looking at is if you're doing affordable housing, you can go to Colorado Springs, you can go to El Paso County and apply for funding. I heard about the revolving loan fund from the county, which is tremendous. Well, you can go to the state. You can go to my partner agency, the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. How many applications is that? 4? What we're working on is a single point of application. This would streamline and move things much more rapidly. So we're expecting the first step to be rolled out in November. Now, I mentioned AI at the beginning. This is something that we're working on now, and we're really excited about. So we actually are contracted with Archistar, and Gary Community Investments is actually funding it. And so what we're looking at is looking at the plan review and permitting. And so we're the first state in the country to actually look at how we can approve these plans using AI. Of course, you have to have a human in it because you have to verify that things are actually working correctly. You can get some really weird searches on some of the AI searches. But we're looking at using that AI in order to streamline our plan reviews. We're actually also partnered with Greeley, and Greeley's going to be the first local government in Colorado trying this out as well. So when you look at what to expect in the future, one thing I can say about Colorado and the people in Colorado is we are resilient. We are strong. We are innovative. I'm just wondering if I'm standing in the room with somebody that might have that silver bullet that will help us make these things happen faster. That we can have the housing to house the people in our communities that they can afford. But through all of that, we need to be looking at population growth, wages and cost shifts, and construction hurdles. But we need to be focusing on what we know works. Smart investment, good policy, land use reform, innovation. And then, of course, building on our strong partnerships. This is what's going to make our future brighter. So I want to end with those words that I started with, which are innovation, streamlining, AI, because it's not going away, change, and disruptors. These things are going to impact the work that we do, whether we like it or not, and we need to be prepared. Change is going to happen, and we need to make it the best for our communities. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Brett Forrest with KOAA News 5. So I'm handling the Q&A portion now. We do have time for a few questions before the next session and break. So I have the form pulled up here. If you're sending any questions at the moment with that QR code, I can try to get to them. Otherwise, we do have a few we can start with pending time. First of all, let's have a round of applause for Alison George for that great presentation. All right, so I'll start with this question. With the state's budget deficit and the big hole that lawmakers are trying to plug, how is that going to trickle down and affect a lot of the housing programs you just mentioned? I know Prop 23 might be losing some funding next year, so can you talk about that?
That is a great question. And so the way Prop 123 was actually written is that the first cut to Prop 123 actually is looking at funding that would be focused on the future. So things like land banking. When we first started this effort, we were like, got to think about the future and need to, buy land so that we'll have land for future affordable housing. Well, when the budget gets so tight, land banking is the first thing to be cut. And so what has been proposed is that the land banking in Prop 123 be reduced and some of the concessionary debt to be reduced. The Division of Housing, the funds that we administer, are not actually proposed at this time to be cut because the funding that we are administering are direct to individuals. It's not that future focus. It's looking at down payment assistance. It's looking at home ownership opportunities, homelessness and vouchers, that type of thing. And so there is a proposal to cut a little over $100 million from Prop 123, and that will be focused on the land banking and concessionary debt at this time.
And I know we're talking a lot about our region and Colorado, but is there a city or state around the country that is doing housing well, building enough that you've seen that we're able to try to emulate here in Colorado?
I love that question. There are a lot of great communities here in Colorado, okay, and components of great things that are being done. And so I think it's really looking at some of those best practices. One thing that I've seen, like in the state of Washington, and thinking about homelessness again, they actually have WDOT has a right-of-way program where they focus on with responders to find placements for people that are residing in the right-of-ways. And so that would be considered one of those best practices that could be used in Colorado or other communities. So there are a lot of best practices that are happening. I'm excited to see what Greeley's doing with the AI and streamlining its entitlement process. Let's see, so many good things in so many communities. I'll bring up a few other things as I think about that.
Okay, no worries. And kind of putting you on the spot with data knowledge, you mentioned the 106,000 units short in 2023. Any idea if we've decreased that even further in the years since?
That's a great question that I'm actually worried about. Because we are starting to see permitting. So how we track this is we look at permits. And so we're starting to see the pulling of permits slow down. And my concern with that is it tends to mean that we are headed for more challenges. And it's something that the state demographer will be looking at closely. But what they do is they look at data that they can validate, And so 2023 is the earliest year that they can validate, or the most recent year.
And this is probably the last question due to timing, but kind of more of a philosophical question. You mentioned the American dream, and we hit our record high median sales price here in the region in June. It's decreased a little bit since then, but would you say the American dream is out of reach at this point for a lot of people?
Oh, it's definitely out of reach for a lot of people. And it hurts me. This is my life's work. I love to celebrate. Yes, I'm talking about Greeley quite a bit. I was actually in Greeley on Monday and toured Habitat for Humanity's Hope Springs development. And just seeing people have that opportunity for the American dream is beautiful. But the amount of money that it takes for a salary is just getting higher and higher, which is truly unfortunate. And so that's why it's going to take looking at policies, looking at streamlining, looking at funding as well, in order to, make these things possible for more and more families. We don't have that silver bullet. And I really hope one of you knows what that silver bullet is. But it's something that we're wanting to aspire to.
Okay, well, again, thank you, Alison George, and congrats on your retirement. And one more round of applause, and thank you, everyone. Time for your break before the next session. Thank you.